Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the virtual tour of Medicine and Memory by the National Art Gallery. We're really happy to have Katrina Cartwright, the Manager of Education and Outreach from the National Art Gallery of the Bahamas, known as the NAGB, with us. And she's going to tell us a bit about herself and the exhibition, and then we're going to jump right into it.
Yes, thank you so much, Alicia. So happy International Women's Day to everyone. I'm so grateful that we've been invited by Equality Bahamas to do this with you. So as Alicia said, I am the Education and Outreach Manager at the NAGB. And what that means is basically I work with a team of incredible people to think about we all think about how we can make the institution more accessible and get more art, more opportunities to participate in the arts to as many people living and working in the Bahamas as humanly possible. So that's what we spend a lot of our time thinking about. How do we create more access to for everyone, even those people who many times think that art is not for them. So today we're going to focus on our permanent exhibition. It's called Medicine and Memory, Public Health in the Bahamas. And what I'm going to try to do is kind of take you on a virtual walk because, in this time of COVID, even though we've opened up just a little bit, in a lot of ways, we still do a lot of things virtually just because we want to make sure everybody stays safe, and also to make sure that as many people as possible can have access to opportunities like this. Our permanent exhibition, it highlights work from the National Collection in conversation with works from other collections. So I am going to start sharing my screen so you can see all the lovely images that I am seeing. So there we go. Share. All right. So medicine and memory, public health in the Bahamas. Now, this was conceived mid last year, and really thinking about where we were as a country, thinking about Dorian, climate crisis, thinking about the pandemic, and the fact this is not our first pandemic at all. This is not our first epidemic in this country. We have been through something like this before, and we've come through the other side, and we've been able to continue to thrive and grow, but also looking at what that means for people in terms of access to healthcare, access to work in terms of being able to feed yourself, feed your families, thinking about people living on the out islands, what does access look like to them, thinking about our history of medicine in this country, this kind of blend of Western medicine and what we call bush medicine, which is homeopathic medicine that we have inherited from our African ancestors, most of whom were from West Africa. So really looking at that. Now, this exhibition has been divided into 4 sections, and those are the history of public health in the Bahamas, post-colonial health inequalities, alternate healing modalities and Black history practices, and climate injustice on health and well-being. And we did something very different with this particular exhibition. We have an online exhibition, and we also have an on-site exhibition. So you can see both, because you can go to the NAGB's website and go right into our exhibitions page and go right down to online exhibitions, and you can see the online version of this exhibition. You can also come to the NAGB because we are now open. Granted, social distancing protocols are all in place. You have to wear your mask, and you have to check your temperature, but you can certainly come and visit us. It is currently free for Bahamians, so do pass by and you'll be able to see the entire exhibition if you want to. So let's dive right in. And like I said, this is a bit of a walkthrough, a virtual walk through the exhibition. And what I've done is I've blended images from inside the gallery. So this is actually what's up right now. And then we're going to be focusing on individual works and some of which are a part of the online exhibition, even if they're not a part of the on-site exhibition. So what you're looking at as you walk in, so this is literally what you're going to see as you walk in, are two works here. This one here is called Anakeona by Chantal Bethel. She is a Bahamian artist living in Grand Bahama. And the second one is called Fruits of Discovery by Jackson Burnside. And this is the first section of the exhibition that focuses on the history of public health in the Bahamas and going back as far as the Lucayans, and the fact that we don't know a lot about them and what they contributed to our history. Every time you turn around, you find hearing something new because more work is being done and more research is being done. But thinking about what the impact of the Spanish coming in had on our history as a country, but also thinking about what we inherited from the Lucayans, because they also had their own medicine. They also used many of the same plants we use now in their medicinal practices. And thinking about, the movement of peoples and what they all brought into this space, because the Bahamas has historically always been this transitional space where many people leave, but some people stay. So we've had histories coming from people, from the Lucayans, from displaced Africans, from free Africans, from Europeans, from the Americas, and coming down even from Latin America, because we are also a space where people came up, and this is where the Lucayans come into play. So as we look through, and here we go, this is another shot of the gallery from the other side, and this here is actually a map of Fort Montague and Nassau. We don't know where that is, but again, thinking about your geography, thinking about your landscape, thinking about the history of the space and how they all come together to create a lot of the situations we're dealing with now in terms of like access to clean water, in terms of infrastructure that allow people to be able to be mobile and get medical care as well. And I'm going to just focus on this particular piece for now. And this is glass pottery and fragments from the African Hospital. So what is now our art park, if you've heard us talking about our art park, was associated with the site of the first African hospital, and that was built in about the 1780s, so about the 1700s. And that was when it was that was when the first documentation was found. That first documentation was dated in the 1780s. And this was a space where a lot of the West African healing practices were used in addition to the Western medical healing practices, because what we found is that when people migrated from Britain here, when we were colonized, they realized that a lot of their medical practices actually did not help to cure diseases that they found here. So they ended up having to create this amalgamation of what they knew, but also what the West African peoples who were brought here knew, and finding ways to deal with these tropical illnesses that they had never encountered before. So the African hospital it was, of course, it's no longer in existence, but the site where it's believed to have been located, which is where the art park is now, it was like an archaeological site, and we found all these shards of pottery and apothecary bottles that we believe were used to hold medicine. It's really interesting, and we continue to find things as it rains and more stuff is unearthed. So for about 3 years, we were just picking up bottles and shards of pottery. Now, our second room, and this is when you walk out of the first area that dealt with the history of public health in Bahamas, and now we move into our second room, which is looking at post-colonial health inequalities. So right in the middle here, this is a piece by LeVar Munro called, as a part of his Gun Dog series. And LeVar Monroe is an artist who really grew up in the Over the Hill area, really was a part of the space, when gangs were quite prolific, when being in spaces with people who are, who don't have access to a lot of basic things, running water inside toilets, electricity, right? What we consider basic these days. And really thinking about that, but thinking about, well, what does the word, thinking about gun dogs, right? So he created like an actual dog, but he's using materials here that are found on the side, like basically cast off, would be trash. And really thinking and create this very fierce beast. It's almost as if it's trying to protect you. But also it's made from something that's incredible, ephemeral as well, because these materials do not last long, even though they've been coated in copious amounts of epoxy. Eventually this will disintegrate because it's cardboard. So the piece I want to really focus on is this one called Mother's Gone by Maxwell Taylor. And it's a really amazing piece. It highlights historic and contemporary issues around Black women in terms of access to adequate and effective healthcare. We think about the fact that statistically, I mean, even in the US now, Black women, there's a higher rate, mortality rate for Black women in the US than there is for women of color than there is for their white counterparts. In this country, we know that the public health care system needs a lot of work. We have recently been, I mean, of course, you're following social media, people sharing some horror stories from their experience giving birth, and really thinking about access, but also quality care and what that means. And in this case, and the fact that, I mean, the reality is that most of the people who would be accessing the public healthcare system in this country are people of color. They are Black Bahamians. And unfortunately, we understand that the public healthcare system is overwhelmed, and we know that it is not adequate, but it also doesn't make it, we can say all those things, but it doesn't make it easy for the families that are experiencing what happens when you cannot get adequate or effective healthcare. So in this case, we have a man, he's crying, and he's left with all of these children. How he's going to take care of these children, because of course, thinking about historically in this country, men are seen as the providers and women are seen as the caregivers. So how would somebody who has never had to be in a position of caregiver now take care of all these children and be a provider as well? So it's a pretty heavy piece, I would say. I think you could stand there and look at it, and a lot of people would probably be able to relate to this as well. So this is another view of the gallery. We kind of like switched and turned the other direction. We're looking forward. And here you can see several pieces. This is one by Kendra Forup. This has been a part of many of our exhibitions. So if you've ever come to any of our exhibitions in the past, you may have seen this piece. And this is a man who is walking with shoes on his shoulder and his hand. He's selling shoes. So again, thinking about injustices, thinking about also health inequalities. Again, would someone like him be able to afford like really good healthcare? You know, you're selling shoes on the side of the road. They don't even look like they're very new, but also he has this look on his face like, you know what, it's hard. I'm having a rough time, but I'm going to keep on going. So there's a determination there as well. We are going to talk a bit more about this piece right here by Peggy Hering. And also the piece next to it is by Jackson Petit. It is called The Home We Share. So it may be a little hard because we're not really zooming in, but you can see someone, looks like a woman, is sitting, washing clothes in a tub. And these two are side by side because they really speak to each other. They're really addressing many of the same concerns. So let's talk a bit about Grantstown by Peggy Hering. So this is a bit of a favorite of mine because I feel like it's very easy to look at this and think, oh, it's charming. And I guess in its own way it is, but as you delve into this, and you also, if anybody's ever driven through neighborhoods that have yards with clapboard homes and like this where the water pump is there, you know that most times there's like litter, there's trash, it's not this clean. So it's obvious the artist probably took that out of the scene. And even though the kids are there smiling and they look like they're happy, you know, they're still at the water pump. This was done in 1984. These water pumps were put in the 1860s. And it was major infrastructure done in the over the hill area during that time because of the cholera and yellow fever epidemic. And they were trying to make sure that the doctors had roads that were accessible where they could go and help people. And they also wanted to make sure that people had access to clean drinking water. And that was also a time when outside toilets were put in. And unfortunately, those outside toilets are still there and people are still using them. And the water pumps are still there and people are still using them because they don't have running water in their homes. So you think about where we are with COVID-19 and the controversy around people needing to go to the water pumps every day during lockdowns. Really, when you start delving into that and those histories, you will begin to see really how problematic this whole scenario really is, especially during a time when by the 1980s, there should have been running water, and definitely by now, there should have been running water in all of these homes, and there is not. So our third piece in that area is called Packing and Shipping Pines by Frank Coonley. And we have a lot of these photos by Frank Coonley in our national collection. Photos that were taken between the 1850s and the early 1900s that really, in some cases, they're documentation of the Bahamas at that point in time. And other cases, they're extremely problematic because they try to make poverty charming, which is again problematic. And it's really done through a very particular kind of lens. So you kind of like the happy Black Bahamian who is poor, but they're happy with their lot in life. So it was either prosperity or charm through poverty, or other I would say kind of conversations that were quite problematic, I think. And of course, understanding the time it was done, now we look back and realize we pick it apart. But at that point in time, these were some of the photos that got people to come here. These were photos that were used in postcards that people would send back to their homes and say, hey, look at the great time I'm having in the Bahamas. So this was done this photo showcases pineapples. And there was a time when the Bahamas exported pineapples. So I have to drink my tea as I talk. But there was a time when the Bahamas exported pineapples, and it was really seen, having a pineapple was actually seen as it was like an object of prestige, having a pineapple. You had a pineapple, you would have it like at your front entrance to show people you had a pineapple. So we grew these and we exported them. And it's really interesting that right now it's like we're backtracking. Once upon a time, we grew enough food to feed ourselves and we exported some of it. And now we have gone to a point where the majority of our food is imported. And we realize that, especially during COVID, that a food shortage was imminent if the world continues continues where it's going. And we need to focus more on agriculture here. So it's as if we're moving full circle, which is, I guess that's the nature of humanity, but it also makes you wonder, like in terms of foresight, if we were growing our own food, why didn't we continue? So really thinking about those conversations and thinking about how we can change where we are now. So moving on. So again, it's like you're turning and you're going in a bit of a U. And this is kind of like that hallway where you see where we normally have work set up. In this case, this is work by Tamika Galanis called Coral Heads. I think I have the right name there. I will have to double check. And she is, and we'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. So human coral hybrids, sorry. And we are looking straight ahead into our other gallery. So Tamika Galanis' work is a part of our climate injustices section. So it's like you have little pockets that have different stories. And then as you move through these pockets into the hallways, there are conversations about climate injustice and how that connects to public health. So let's talk a bit more about the human coral hybrids. So these are 3D printed, which I find incredibly fascinating because, you know, modern technology is amazing. And I think it's always great to see how artists take all these new things and just incorporate it into their works, because it's just another tool, right? So really thinking about what we inherit. So you see there the faces of, it looked like elderly people, you know, and when you think about somebody being older, we tend to think of them as being wiser, and you have these corals growing out of their heads. So, and the conversation for the artists is really about like, what do we inherit from our ancestors? You know, thinking about the trauma that our ancestors, our African ancestors experienced being captured and brought here across the ocean, you know, to a place that wasn't there, to a country that wasn't their own, and being forced to live a life that they never thought they would ever have, right? Going from being free to being captured to being owned. So thinking about that trauma, thinking about the lives lost in the transatlantic slave trade, and really thinking about how that has become a part of our DNA, because there's a lot of discussions about that, about people who have experienced extreme trauma, passing that trauma on to their ancestors. So really thinking about what we inherit, but also thinking about how these individuals, what they brought with them, and also their strength, and how their wisdom and strength and determination continue to bolster us. So we're now in our third gallery, and this one focuses on alternate healing modalities and Black healing practices. So, you know, bush medicine, you can think about Obeah spiritual practices, and that in that area, you can also think about Christianity and how that's just a part of our lives. We don't really even think about it. And straight ahead, we have 3 pieces. This is done by Clive Stewart, right here to the left. Again, this woman has a halo around her head, makes you think about somebody who's angelic, who's very spiritual, who is connected with a higher purpose or a higher being. The second one here is called Virtuous Woman by LeVar Monroe, the same artist who did the Gun Dogs piece. So this was done long before he did that work. And the third one is by Brent Malone. It's called Metamorphosis. And they're all hung together. I mean, in terms of, it's almost like they're a triptych, right? So really speaking about spirituality and growth in their own way. So this is called Metamorphosis. It's really, when it makes you think about Junkanoo, but it also makes you think about the fact that you can't see this individual in here, right? Whoever this person is, it's like they have become someone else or something else, and it's beautiful and it's amazing and it's there. And thinking about here in LeVar's piece, you can see this is again someone who looks like a priestess, right? Again, connecting with a higher power, a higher being, going beyond the physical. And that's a huge part of our practices, healing practices, because as a people, we generally believe that, you know, your soul has to be healthy. For you to be healthy as an individual, it goes beyond the physical. So really thinking about that kind of inheritance and who we are. This piece is a part of the online exhibition, and this is actually, well, you see it in the background here. These are our gates that are on the NHEB's property. They were made by Tyrone Ferguson, who is a blacksmith who does amazing work. I mean, I'm sure you've seen a lot of his work around the island. And, you know, he has here in this is like a bush medicine gate. He has scamalamy, cerasee, love vine. He also has marijuana in there too, but of course, marijuana also does have healing properties in this. And he also has a Nancy the spider. So thinking again about our West African inheritance, thinking about, you know, the stories that came, but also the healing knowledge that came as well. Because I know during COVID, I know I told somebody, listen here, I need some cerasee to drink just to be sure, because you know cerasee good for almost anything. Well, almost everything, not everything. Your name, I think, is along the lines of almost everything. So really kind of, again, thinking about homeopathic remedies. And it's really funny, you know, many of us grew up with bush medicine and always thought about something that was other. And now the conversation is always about homeopathic remedies and looking for a natural doctor and thinking about alternatives to pharmaceutical medicine. So it's really interesting that what was just a part of our lives that we didn't really think about once upon a time is now becoming trendy. And again, going back to spirituality. So this piece is untitled by Nettie Symonette. And if she had an exhibition at the NAGB about 3 years ago. And really it was all about mysticism and spirituality. And, you know, these bottles are hung and put in trees. This is actually something that comes from more of the American South, but hung and put in trees to keep bad spirits away. And it's something that I'm sure most of us have seen at some point in our lives, especially if you grew up on the island. This idea that these bottles, you know, if they're filled with salt or sand, depending on what the contents are, and they're hung in a tree, they act as protection. So we're going back into climate injustices and inequalities. And here we have 3 pieces by Sue Bennett Williams. And they are, the first one is called Unearthed. So this is like it looks a little bit like a cross between a orchid and something else. And then these are all called a kelp series. So 5, 6, and 3. So again, thinking about a natural environment, thinking about the sea, especially, I think, you know, historically, we've always had a bit of, I would say, a contentious relationship with the sea. The sea gives, but it also takes away. You know, we depend on it for livelihoods, we depend on it for food, but we also have lost people to the sea as well. We've lost people, we've lost homes, sometimes your livelihood as well just washed away. And thinking about the fact that we are below sea level as a small island state, we are most impacted by climate change and rising sea levels. So thinking about the fact that even if we work to cut our carbon emissions, really and truly in the grand scheme of things, it's not going to make that big of a difference if the larger countries are not working to do the same, but we are the ones that are impacted the most. And this was a lot of the conversations that were coming about after Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico and basically around the Southern Caribbean in that area, and also Dorian. So all of these smaller Caribbean countries are asking, well, you know what, if these bigger countries are impacting their behaviors, impacting us in such a negative way, shouldn't they have to basically be taxed for it? Like, shouldn't they have to support us when we are when we receive the consequences of their actions? So, and this is a great example of what those consequences look like. So this is work by Leanne Russell. It's called Living on Kendrick Street, Hurricane Hut Row. So after, and this was a part of our refuge exhibition that we had on show in December of 2019 in response to Hurricane Dorian. And she did several of these pieces for the show. And these are photo overlays. So the photo on the top is a photo from the 1930s. I think I have that right. The 1930s, when the Great Hurricane of 1932 hit Abaco. And this photo is overlaying a picture of the same home that was taken after Dorian. And really thinking about how horrible that hurricane was. So Leanne Russell's grandfather, I think it was great-grandfather, I have to get that right, her grandfather, sorry, he migrated from Britain, and he was living in living and working in Abaco, and the hurricane hit, and he housed about 100 people in his house during the hurricane. It was a small house, and it was still standing. It's actually this very same house here. And later on, he went on to study medicine in Britain, and he came back. So really thinking about, the kind of resilience, but also the sense of community in the face of disaster and helping each other out. And the fact that we've gone through disasters before and we've rebuilt. So there's also a lot of hope in this as well that I find quite compelling. And of course, we're paying homage to all of our Family Island doctors who we know are extremely under-resourced and who barely get a day off and tend not to never have enough supplies or equipment or even staff because they're the only doctor on the island. This piece, I think this is one of our last pieces, is called by Margot Bethel, and this is called "Everything is Not Level and I Am Not Straight." And this is this is an extremely interactive piece. This is a part of Transforming Spaces in 2014. And the theme at that point, I think, was water, something along those lines. And this is a seesaw. So the idea is that people would come and they would sit on either end, and while they're moving, they would talk. And while they're moving, these water levels would change. And when you went up, the water went down and went closer to the person at the bottom, and vice versa. So having conversations about, what does it mean to have too much of something, right? Too much water, too many resources, or more resources than you need, like sharing that with somebody else. What does it mean to have an imbalance in terms of who you are, but also in terms of the way the country sees you as well. So so this is a piece I think that you can have many conversations around. It's so simple, but this idea that when you're able to balance it perfectly, the water in each of those containers levels out. And that's the end of our tour. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, you can put it in the comments on Facebook, and Alicia is keeping an eye on that, and I will try my very, very best to answer. I may not be able to answer, but I will try my very best to answer.
Thank you so much for that, Katrina. You covered a lot in a short space of time.
I wasn't timing it.
You did an awesome job.
Oh my goodness. We were doing so many of these 30-minute tours. I think that I have an internal timer now.
Yeah.
So we have time for questions.
Yeah. So throughout basically all the pieces that you showed, there's this theme of history, right? And connecting it to some of our current practices. And so I wonder who's sort of the audience that needs to see this exhibition and be making the connections between historical practices and the ones that we retain today?
I feel like anybody who lives or works in the Bahamas, anybody who is from this country, yeah, I think it's for them, and the people who live here too, because I do think there are elements of the exhibition that you really wouldn't get if you're not here, like if you're not from here or you haven't been kind of entrenched in this space. But I feel like the other side of that too is even if you're coming from the outside and you have no experience with Bahamian culture at all, I feel like you can go through that exhibition and read, of course, the information and be able to pull some thoughts, some ideas, some knowledge from what's being said. But in terms of the audience, I feel like anybody whoever drank a cup of bad tasting Cersei, like this is for you. Anybody who's ever, had to go to a water pump, or who's ever had to tote water draw water in a bucket out of a well, you know, anybody who has ever had to try to figure, like go to PMH and stand that really, really long line and stay like for 24 hours trying to get admitted, like this is for you. And it's for the people who haven't experienced that either, because I think even if you haven't experienced it, you've definitely heard about it, because this is about having a conversation at wherever you're coming from. This is about having that conversation. I think there's something in it for everybody, because I had this conversation with someone. I'm like, this country is so small. I don't know if you could speak. I don't know if there are a whole lot of Bahamians you can speak to who weren't impacted in some way by Hurricane Dorian, whether it's because they were doing charity work, they had family, friends, they knew somebody who knew somebody. Like, this is the space we live in, right? And I think that there's a lot to relate to in this exhibition, even if some of it is uncomfortable.
Yeah. So you said you've been doing a lot of 30-minute tours. How do people arrange tours if they want, like if there's a work thing, people want to do like team building or like a little outing for work people, students. How do people go about arranging that?
Well, we have a lot of different options. So we have school tours, we have adult tours, but we also have community tours as well. We have free tours once a month on fourth Sunday. So on the fourth Sunday of every month, you can come to the museum between 12 and 5. We advertise it and get a free tour, like physically in the space, because we are open. And while we are still enforcing social distancing protocols and safety protocols, we do allow small numbers of people into the museum at a time. And we also have the virtual option as well. And it's incredible how our family islanders have really been participating in this, because I think what we know and we've been trying to kind of figure out a way to make happen is creating more access to our out islanders, because we live in an archipelago. You have to either get on a boat or on a plane to go to another island, right? And we are the physical building, the NHEB building is in Nassau. So what COVID gave us the opportunity to do is to put everything online. And we have had so many people from the out islands participating. And all they did was they just got in touch with us. You go on our website, there's a section for tours, you fill out a form, or you can just go in our learn section, and in the tours section, it tells you who to get in contact with. We always answer, always. So, we try to make it very easy, very pain-free. Of course, we ask you to give us a little bit of lead time, because we're a really small team. We're a really small team. So we need a little bit of time to make sure that we can accommodate you. But we do both now. We do on-site in very small numbers, and we do virtual for larger groups, for school groups, for community groups, and for adults. And it's, again, I'm amazed. I think we've done about 3 different tours for Family Islands schools so far. And when we were doing online fourth Sundays, most of the people we had tuning in were from the out island. So
that's awesome, because now there's access.
Now there's access. And we're having this moment of Bahamians don't really like technology. We don't know how this is going to go. And we have we've been proven wrong.
Everyone's had to adapt and learn new things now.
Yes.
All of our grandparents are on Zoom now, so
yeah, I don't know if that's a good thing.
It's opinions.
So we do both. The tours on property at the museum tend to be a little longer because, of course, there's so much to see. But definitely for the virtual tours, we tend to be able to kind of cut them back a little bit and customize them for the times that we're doing them in.
How much time do you think people should set aside for an in-person visit?
About an hour.
An hour. And then
About
you
an
mentioned
hour.
the art garden. What is that, and what is there to see?
So the art park is new. Well, new in terms of like it's now a full-fledged exhibition with a lot more sculptures in it. So we've been working on the art park for about 3 years, 4 years, 4 years. Yes, it's still a work in progress, but we're really excited. The trees are growing. The trees are growing like nobody's around, and suddenly you go there and the trees are like twice the height they were before. Um, so it's filled primarily with indigenous plants, donated very graciously by the BNT. We have sculptures in the park made by local artists as well. So, and we will continue to add. So right now we have works in the garden. So it's an actual sculpture garden. Art. So we call it the art park because it's also a space where you can go and sit down. Like hopefully one day it'll be under an actual tree when the trees are big enough.
Yeah.
So, but right now what we're trying to create is really like this really nice, peaceful space where you could, get away from it all, sit in the park, see the birds, breathe some fresh air, because we're a little a ways from downtown, so all the pollution isn't necessarily coming to us. Um, See some art, and just take a load off, and it's free. It's free. You can just come into the park and sit down. I mean, I don't know. There's not a whole lot of spaces on this island where you can do that quietly
Really
in a safe
hard.
place. No, with 20, and we have 24-hour security. So it's safe, it's free, it's beautiful. And one day it'll be very, very cool because the trees will be very tall.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what is coming up
So
next? What should people mark their calendars
oh
to?
well, we have two major exhibitions opening in April. And actually, before I move on to that, I'll also say that we have an online, we actually have an online exhibition for the art park. So we have a floral walk and an art walk. So when you're there, you can pull up our website and go in the floral walk section, and it has information on the plants, like their name and the thing with the artwork. You can literally go through. You can get artworks page and hear little voiceovers from the artists talking about their work and so on. So that's something that, yeah. So I mean, so it's really a South tour, and you could really spend some time if you're a nature lover. You could definitely spend some time really like going through that floral walk session. Coming up, we have our Inter-Island Traveling Exhibition, which is going to be for all the family islands. It's virtual, and it's going to be launched on I think that's the 22nd of March that week. During that week online, and we are going to be working with schools on the smaller family islands to actually do virtual workshops. So that's coming up. And even though we're saying it's for the family islands, there is a virtual exhibition that's going to be up on the website, so anybody can access it and see it. We have two major exhibitions opening in April. I think it's April 15th. I have that right. Inherit the Earth, that's works by Lynn Parati. And Floating Rib, we have works by about 6 or 7 artists, including one of the artists you saw today, Margot Bethel. So we're not going to have our big splash opening because of course COVID, but it is going to be open, and the public will be able to see it after the 15th. So we're always busy. And we have an Easter egg hunt coming up as well on the 3rd. Oh wow, how could I forget that? Again, on property, socially distanced. There is going to be a limited number of people who are allowed at a time, but we really wanted to make sure that this Easter, the kids were able to have a somewhat normal time during the time of, church and eggs and bunnies.
Yeah, I noticed you said kids. Does that mean that there's no adult Easter egg hunt?
Well, you know how parents are. They really go and they hunt with their kids.
They're going to get all of
But we do have something just for adults on Good Friday. I will say on Good Friday, we're having a pop-up market. So, if you didn't have the chance to buy some of your like stuff for Easter, and it's not really like Easter themed, but we know what it is to get Easter basket stuffers, especially if you have adults who like Easter baskets. You can come on Good Friday, going to be there, and get some hot cross buns and get some nice yeah, we have a lot of stuff happening. I didn't realize how much. So there's tons of stuff to do, tons of stuff to see. Just follow us on Facebook and Instagram, check us on our website. And of course, if you haven't done so already, you can also join our newsletter, and that keeps you up to date on everything we're doing, because we always have something happening.
Yep, definitely a good idea to sign up for the newsletter. So everyone should visit the website, nagb.org.bs, sign up for the newsletter, and then you'll always know. It'll come right to your inbox exactly what's going on at NAGB.
Yes. So Alicia, if I see your name down for our Easter egg hunt, I know you're going to be one of our Easter egg hunters, right?
I'm going to find some baby. Somebody baby.
I will keep an eye out. It's fine, because the little ones, they always need help.
I'll be right there. See one right here. Awesome. Definitely. Well, this is great. I wish we had longer, but I think it's good to have a little teaser so people could actually come in to see the work and check out the website on their own and kind of self-pace the tour. I think this is a great intro. So thank you so much, Katrina, for spending.
Well, thank you too. Thank you too.
Your evening with us.
Yeah.
And we're looking forward to coming back to in-person events at the NAGB.
Yes, and they are coming. Please stay tuned. We have a lot of stuff in the works that we're very excited about, because we realize people are a little tired of the virtual world. So we're trying to see if we can do both, a little virtual and a little on-site. So you begin to feel like you're still connected just a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, I will definitely see you at the Easter egg hunt. Maybe before that at the pop market.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much, Alicia. And thank you to everybody who joined us tonight. And of course, you know how to reach us. And we look forward to seeing you at the NAGB.
See you soon.
All right. Good night.